Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first keynote for this day 3 of NCEA convention. It's my honor to be able to introduce our keynote speaker this morning, Byron Pitts. Many of you know he is the co-anchor of Nightline and chief national correspondent of ABC News, and the host of the show Soul of a Nation, which is a groundbreaking new series on Black life in America on ABC. He is the author of 2 books, Step Out on Nothing, How Faith and Family Helped Me Conquer Life's Challenges, his memoir of his life growing up in Baltimore, and Be the One, 6 true stories of teens overcoming hardship with hope. Byron and I had a great conversation on NCA podcast about a month ago, so please check that out on our podcast page, or you can find it in the on-demand section of Cadence here at convention. Byron, great to have you with us. Welcome, and take it away.
Hey, Kevin, thank you so much, my friend, for the kind introduction. Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody is doing well this morning, wherever you are in this world. I guess in a normal year, we might be gathering in some nice convention hall somewhere in the country, conversing, being together. But now we all get to sit in our gym shorts and sweatpants in our respective homes, perhaps some people in the office, to be together. I'm grateful for this time to talk with you all. I think we have about 40 minutes or so. I'm Baptist, so I could go long, just kidding. I won't, I'll be respectful of your time and our chance to have this conversation. I love the theme for this year for you guys, Ignite, Unite, Inspire. Certainly that's what my Catholic education did for me. As Kevin said, I was born and raised in Baltimore, not just Baltimore, but East Baltimore. And for those of you familiar with the city, you know there's West Baltimore, there's East Baltimore, and they're 2 different worlds, or at least that's how we from Baltimore see it. I want to talk to you about my experience in Catholic school, how it transformed my life. I went to St. Catherine's Elementary School and Archbishop Curley High School. But a little bit about, I'm going to sort of start backwards. I'll tell you about who I am now, and then the role that my time, in particular at Curley, how it shaped my life, and how I know the work that each of you do in this difficult season of life is so incredibly important. So I'm a professional journalist. As Kevin mentioned, I work at ABC News now. I've been a journalist now for about 40 years, which simply means I'm old. I, as a network journalist for the last 20 plus years, first at CBS News and now at ABC News. I've been so fortunate in my career. I've interviewed the last 7 presidents of the United States. I've covered 3 wars. I've been to 56 countries. And at last count, I've watched 48 people die. I've watched as American service members gave their full measure to our great nation in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. I was in Haiti not long after the earthquake there, the tsunami in Indonesia. I've witnessed 2 executions. I was a witness to the execution of Timothy James McVeigh. He's the homegrown terrorist raised in a Christian household, convicted of killing 168 men, women, and children in Oklahoma City. So in many ways, as a professional journalist, I make my living covering death, and I make my peace with it. But something that makes me uneasy still is indifference. When good and decent people who've been blessed with resource and talent and opportunity are indifferent to the needs of other people. Life has taught me in my 60 years on God's earth that indifference can be a deadly weapon. And so the core of my message to all of you today, and I know that in many ways I'm preaching to the choir, amen, is not to be indifferent to all of our opportunities, each of us as individuals, us collectively, our opportunity to change the world. I believe that, change the world. I believe that of all of us, of all of you. I believe it not just because of the work I've done as a professional journalist these past 40 years, but I believe it because of the life I've lived. You see, long before I was a correspondent at 60 Minutes or the anchor of Nightline on ABC News, I was a kid from East Baltimore, raised by a single parent. My mother had her first child when she was 17. I didn't learn to read until I was 12. I spoke with a stutter until my junior year in college. At a public school in Baltimore, failing all classes, they decided to bring me in for a series of tests because I was in the same elementary school as my older brother and sister they'd gone to. They were fine students. So they wanted to figure out, why is it that Byron can't read? And so they brought me in and I sat before this group of experts, like fancy folk like you guys, right? People with master's degrees and PhDs. I like to say people with initials in the beginning and the back end of their names. And so these experts ran a series of tests, and it took about almost the entire day. And my mom went with me. My mom's name is Clarice Pitts. You'll hear a lot about Clarice in the next half hour. And at the time, my mother had a 10th grade education. She worked at the London Fog Coat Factory in Baltimore, where we lived. Now, eventually she would go back to school and earn her college degree from Morgan State University in Baltimore and spend the bulk of her professional life as a social worker, her 40s as a social, 40s and 50s as a social worker. But in that moment, she was a woman of limited means and limited education. So these experts ran this. Oh, a final thought about my mother. My mother is a God-fearing woman. I like to say I had the best of both worlds. I was raised Baptist, educated Catholic. I hope you're all laughing. That's one of my favorite jokes to tell. And my mother believed in the Bible. She believed in the power of prayer. She believed in scripture. My mother could quote scripture with any of the priests I had at Curley. But she could also hold a conversation with any sailor, any longshoreman anywhere in the country, if you get my drift. So these experts ran these tests, and they brought my mom and I in for the results and said, Ms. Pitts, we're sorry to inform you that your son Byron, it's our conclusion, your son Byron is mentally retarded. Their words, not mine. And we don't believe he possesses the mental capacity to live a normal, healthy life. So our recommendation, some of them was like, wait, before we get to recommendations, what do you mean my son is retarded? Test him again. And they said, well, Ms. Pitts, did you just hear what we said? And she said, did you hear what I just said? And she used some muscular language to get her point across. And I think, they probably had the option of either have her arrested or test me again. They decided, okay, we'll test this kid again. And so they ran these series of tests again a few weeks later and brought us back for the results. And they said, Ms. Pitts, just as we thought, the results were the same. And our conclusion is the same, that Byron is mentally retarded. He lacks the mental capacity to live a normal, healthy life. Knowing your circumstance, i.e. poor, Black, undereducated, our only recommendation to you is that you put him in an institution or bring him back when he's 18, and perhaps there might be some program available in Baltimore, in Maryland. And my mother said, I can't do that. I'm not going to do that. If I wait until my son is 18 years old, my boy will be dead or in prison. And he needs help right now. But none was available. Fortunately for me, what my mother lacked in formal education at the time, she made it with her knowledge of the word, as the old folks would say. You see, for all of my life and for much of her life, my mother wore around her neck a small mustard seed encased in a clear plastic ball. It was my mother's daily reminder of the scripture in the book of Matthew that says, if you have faith just the size of a mustard seed, you can say to any mountain, move from here to there, and nothing will be impossible. It is with my mother's mountain moving faith that she got me the help I needed. And I've been able to live my dreams. God called my mom home about 8 years ago. I wear her cross, and inside is the mustard seed that she wore. As she took her last breath, I took it off her neck and put it on mine. My mother didn't have many options, but the only option that she thought she had, the best option she thought she had for me, was to put me in Catholic school. And Interesting enough, there were no particular resources at St. Catherine's to deal with a kid who had my issues. But my mother just knew and believed that in that space, it would be a space that culturally supported her faith. Though she was Baptist, and this was a Catholic school, she felt that we all prayed to the same God, believed fundamentally in the same things. And while there may not be the resources there that the world might say I need, my mother felt in that space, my son will be safe. He'll be in a nurturing, demanding, faith-based environment. And that was enough for her. So I stumbled through St. Catherine's, and somehow I got accepted to Archbishop Curley High School. Can't imagine how that was possible. In fact, I found out years later that my freshman year at Curley, I was ranked 445th out of 450 students, 5 for the bottom. I always thought, well, dang it, I know I had issues, but what was troubling the brother at 446, 447, 448, 449, and 450? What must their issues have been? Now, eventually, I would graduate from Curley, 40th in my class. Not the best student in Archbishop Curley, but the best student I could be. In the case of my mother, I wrote this book called, as Kevin mentioned, called Step Out on Nothing. The title is called Step Out on Nothing, How Faith and Family Shaped My Life. And a lot of the stories in that book are about my mom, Clarice Pitts, and in particular about my experience at Archbishop Curley High School. I can't tell you how transformative Curley was and still is for me. I'm still active at the school. My experience at Curley shaped me more than college. It is the lessons that I learned at Curley that have inspired me in my professional journey, kept my heart safe in dangerous places like Afghanistan, Iraq, and Somalia over the years. Lessons I learned on Sinclair Lane from Archbishop Curley High School. I love the fact, one of the things I loved about Curley and the Catholic education I got there was that Curley at the time was run by a Franciscan priest. And the vows they took of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Now, I'm Baptist, so the chastity thing I didn't quite get. But obedience and poverty, in particular poverty, because up until that point, for me, poverty was only associated with shame, being less than, other. But being in this space with these men who I respected, and to know that they made the choice to live a modest life. For the first time in my life as a 13, 14-year-old boy, these men in their vows gave dignity to the life I was living at the time, that there was no shame in poverty. That in fact, it was from that position in poverty that you could serve God, that you could serve society, that you could dream. And that's what I did. One of the priests at Archbishop Curley was Father Bartholomew, Father Bart. I wrote in my book that for me, Father Bart was the first time I saw Christ on earth. He looked to me what I thought Jesus might look like. He didn't have the long hair. He had shoulder length blonde hair. But the way he carried himself, he sort of a strong, stern man, not a smiling, stern, but a kind face always. Father Bart was my advisor my freshman year in Curley. And he said, Byron, looking at your transcripts coming from St. Catherine's and the course load you have right now as a freshman at Curley, you will not go to college. And then he paused. And he said, that's where you are now. But at the end of your 4 years at Curley, we will get you to college. It's my promise to you that if you do all that we ask you to do, all that you can do your best, we will do our part, God will do the rest, and you will go to college. That seemed impossible to me. That's why I think in part today as a person of faith, for me, my faith is as real as the table that my iPad is sitting on. It's as real as the computer I'm looking into and the conversation that we're having. because of men like Father Bartholomew. And there were some lay teachers there, women educators who helped transform my life. Today, 4 of my closest friends are my Curly brothers. We get together every summer in July with our spouses and significant others, and I have a home on Martha's Vineyard. And once we dog out Calvert Hall, the Cardinals, our rival school, we still do all these years later. Once we get through that conversation, we talk about what Archbishop Curley did for me, and what it did for all of us as men. All of us are guys who come from blue collar backgrounds. All of my friends are uber successful in their own way. They've raised dynamic families. We had a crisis in our group several years ago. One of my Curly brothers said that he called me up and says, Byron, I need to talk to you. My wife and I are having some real issues at home. I thought, brother, what's okay? Share as you want to. I'm thinking it's financial, it's infidelity, what could it be? And he says, our oldest boy goes to high school next year. And I said, he's going to Curly. And she says he's going to Calvert Hall. And at one point she told me, you got a choice to make, either me or Curly. And he said to his wife, we've had a good run. Now, eventually they compromised. His son went to Curly. His son is now a Curly man, a graduate, and is living a great life. Now, we had some other friends in our circle who made other choices. And we're still in prayer to see if we can forgive them for not sending their sons to Curly. I had daughters, so I didn't have the opportunity to send a child to Archbishop Curley High School. But I say that with deep affection, how much that place means to me, how much it transformed my life, and it's continuing to do so. There's a young man who finished Curly about 5 years ago who I met during one of my visits to Curly. And he is a classic example of the power of the Catholic education, not just of Curly, but in Catholic schools across the country. This kid, when he was in middle school, was struggling. He lived in East Baltimore. As a 12-year-old, he was one of 5 children his mother had by 3 different men. And so as the oldest child, he felt he was the man in the family. And so he took on a job. Well, there aren't many jobs available to 12-year-old boys of color in Baltimore. So he became a drug dealer. For him, it wasn't a moral choice. It was purely an economic decision to help support his family as the man of the house. He played Pee Wee football, and one of the coaches in that program was a Curly man, because in all of us, we learned the importance of service and not just about self. Anyway, it's a great kid. And so he finds out about the backstory of this kid, and he works to get this kid into Archbishop Curley. And there's some hesitancy to let him in because people are aware of his job. People are aware of his academic challenges. And so on the surface, he didn't fit the standard. But I'm so grateful at Archbishop Curley, and I would imagine a number of Catholic schools across this great nation. There are a number of educators and administrators who they don't look the other way, but they look at the challenge of this young person, this young man, this young woman. And they recognize the responsibility that the Catholic Church and the Catholic schools have taken on for generations to help families make a way out of no way. And so that's what they did for this kid. So freshman at Archbishop Curley High School was a known drug dealer in the neighborhood. They worked with him. Like me, his freshman year, failed all classes. I would imagine, I don't know who his counselor was, but I'm sure it was someone like Father Bart who looked him in the eye and said, son, his name is Sean. Sean, you're not going to college. 4 years later, I met Sean during one of my visits to Curley. And so I'd heard his backstory, and by this time, he's a rock star athlete, a rock star student. He's going to college. And I said, Sean, that's awesome, man. I mean, my gosh. So I said, are you a man of faith? He said, yes, sir. I said, are you a praying man? He said, yes, sir. I said, so let me ask you a question. So I said, Sean, at night, when you pray, what do you ask God for? And Sean, as an 18-year-old, stood up straight, his sports coat and tie on. He looked me in the eyes, says, Mr. Pitts, I don't ask God for anything. I thank him. I still get chills when I think about that. This 18-year-old kid still living in a hard-scrabble neighborhood in Baltimore, who had made the choice to no longer sell drugs, but to get other jobs and the support of people at school. I don't ask God anything. I thank him. Wow. So this kid went on to college. And when he went to college, those same socioeconomic challenges he had when he left the doors of Curly still existed. But what happened for him, as it happened for me, as it happens for young people who are fortunate to make it into a Catholic school, his teachers, his administrators, in his case, the school nurse, loved on him beyond the hours of school. And so the school nurse and her husband, who took Sean under their wing, took him to college that fall, because no one in Sean's family had ever been to college. And when they went to pick him up that morning, and someone at school had bought him a computer and someone else to help buy him some clothes. When they go pick up Sean that morning to take him to college, he shows up outside with a couple of trash bags. Like, Sean, what are you doing? Sean didn't own luggage. He didn't have a suitcase. He didn't have a duffel bag. He had all that he had in trash bags. And this nurse and her husband scrambled, got Sean some luggage. Might not have been brand new, might not have been Samsonite or that fancy spancy luggage, but he had luggage when he went to college. Sean graduated from college. He's now a successful young man beginning his professional life, pays taxes, works hard. And I tell you Sean's story because it reminds me that what happened for me as a graduate of Archbishop Curley in 1978 is still happening at schools like Curley, all across this great nation. I mean, all of us are mindful of these difficult times we live in, this racial divide, this pandemic that our country is still going through, and all the people have lost, and all the anxiety that exists, the political divide, the aftermath of our last president, those people who are on, good and decent people who are on both sides of that matter. And I think about, of all the institutions in our great nation that can stand in the gap, serve as bridges to that divide, that's real, isn't new, and is very real. I think about what Catholic schools, how they can help fill that void. I know in the military and covering war, there's lots of talk about being at the tip of the spear, right? Those men and women who are on the front lines of America's battles around the world, those who are tasked with taking life and often losing their life. As relates to things that go on at home here in the United States, I see Catholic schools in particular as a tip of the spear institution that save lives every single day. That the success of Catholic schools, I believe, is as vital as any institution in our great nation. You know, as a journalist, I am a paid skeptic, right? It's my job to afflict the comfortable, comfort the afflicted, shed light in dark places, speak truth to power. And I take that seriously, and that's my line, not to give my opinion, but to seek out truth and report it as fairly as I know how. And I see the impact the Catholic schools continue to have. And you know, if I can take off my journalist hat for a moment and speak to you as a man of faith to people of faith. Catholic schools, what you all do, you perform miracles. It was St. Francis who said to his disciples, go out and preach the word of God, and when necessary, use words. That's what each of you do every single day, that when necessary, you use words, but with your actions, how you live your life, what you've committed your professional lives to. I know that many of you might have other options outside of Catholic education, but you choose to. You don't do it for the money. You do it because of your own faith walk, the value of service, what Catholic education meant, how it might have impacted your life. I know how it impacted mine, and I know why it's so important. I'd like to tell you a final story about why I think what each of you do is so incredibly important, as difficult as it may be. I know schools are closing. I know restrictions because of the pandemic. I know the economic, the financial hardships on Catholic schools and the tuition needed because people aren't going to church the way they used to because of the restrictions. I know it's hard, but I know it's incredibly important. Your work doesn't simply change lives. You save life. You save my life. You save the lives of kids like me every single day. I'm gonna tell you a final story about a kid I know. None of you have met her, but all of you know her. None of you have met her, but all of you know her. Her name is Pilar. She's a girl I met several years ago when she was in middle school in Baltimore. So I do a lot of public speaking, and I go to a lot of schools, mostly colleges, sometimes high school, every now and then a middle school. And usually the question I'll get from middle school kids and some high school kids is, do you know Beyonce? Have you ever interviewed Jay-Z? Those are the deep and probing questions I usually get from school kids in middle school. And so I'm fielding these questions from kids. And this one kid, you've ever been in a public space, as you all have been, and you feel like someone's looking at you. It's not vanity. You just feel like in this public space, someone is focused on you in an intense way. So I have that feeling as I'm standing in front of these kids answering their questions, and teachers and faculty members and administrators who were there. And so the last kid who asked me a question, she stood in line, beautiful 11-year-old girl. She said, "Mr. Pitts, thank you so much for coming back to Baltimore, and thank you so much for your stories, and it was so nice to meet you. I have one question for you." "Sure, baby, what's your question?" She said, "Mr. Pitts, when you were my age, growing up in Baltimore, where did you go? Where did you hide when the world hurt too much? Where did you go? Where did you hide when the world hurt too much?" My friends, no child in the most powerful country on earth should ever ask that question, but we know that they do. Here's Pilar's backstory. Pilar's mom was 16 when she had her, but a child herself, a year younger than my mother when my mother had her first child. When Pilar was 2, her fortunes changed. Her mother had a choice to make, her daughter or her new boyfriend, and she chose her new boyfriend. So from about age 4 to 7, Pilar would stay at an auntie's house, a cousin's house, maybe someone from the church. A babysitter might keep her a couple of extra days. Didn't really have a home. At 8, her fortunes changed. Finally, the family services in Maryland discovered this child in crisis, and placed her in a foster home. And this isn't a criticism of the foster care system at all. Pilar's foster mom was an 81-year-old woman, a diabetic who suffered from almost daily fainting spells. Pilar was 8, she was 81. One can make the argument that in many ways, Pilar was taking care of this woman as much as she was taking care of this child. And so, but Pilar called her mama because this 81-year-old woman was the closest thing she had to family, to a mother, to an adult who loved on her, who nurtured her. So at 10, Pilar's fortunes changed again. Mama, her foster mom, decided for economic reasons, because her heart perhaps felt she had the capacity for, whatever her reasons, she took in a second foster child, a 16-year-old boy. His first night there, he wandered into Pilar's room late at night, crawled next to her and whispered in her ear, "You don't matter. No one will care. Where do you go? Where do you hide when the world hurts too much?" For the next year, that was Pilar's life, almost every day. When I met her and she asked me the question, "Where do you go? Where do you hide when the world hurts too much?" I mean, I didn't have a good answer for her. stumbled around for a moment. Then I said, I said, baby, the best thing I can say to you is that I believe in angels. I do. And I believe if you just keep waking up every day and do the best you can, that you don't have to go looking for an angel. An angel will find you. Fortunately, there was a young educator, first-year teacher, who saw me having this intense conversation with this child, and walked over after and said, "Excuse me, Mr. Pitts, what did PLR ask you?" She didn't talk to anybody. So I explained it to her what PLR had told me, not knowing her backstory. The school investigated. And fortunately, they were able to get her out of that situation. And now she's living a better life. She went to all-girls Catholic high school briefly, and that was transformative for her. And now she's in community college. Catholic education helped change this girl's life. And so, my friends, I know there is a PLR for all of you. It might be a student, it might be a colleague, it might be a family in your parish, it might be a fellow educator. But there are people in your space who are asking, where do I go? Where do I hide when the world hurts too much? And you can be their answer. I know for me, my Catholic education, the priests, the teachers I had, they were the answer for me. They were my angels. So I know that you all are well-educated educators. But at your core, each of you, you're angels. You stand in the gap for people. You make a way out of no way. You believe in people before they know to believe in themselves. So I think we have a few minutes left. I'd like to open up for questions, but I just want to say thank you. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for the sacrifices that you make. I know the Catholic schools are not perfect. None of us are. All of us fall short of the glory of God, and so do our institutions. But I do know, in this magical place that is America, part of what makes America such a special place is the education that kids get. There are no silver bullets in America, right? But I believe one of the vital things that help mend this country together, that help create the next generation of good and decent men and women, is Catholic education. There are other wonderful forms of education, but I know the Catholic experience, what it meant to me. So thank you for all the work that you do. Thank you for the sacrifices that you make. Thank you for the changes, the lives that you change. Know that you are making a difference. I wish each of you continued grace and Godspeed.
Byron, thank you so much. I will just tell you the comments that have been coming in have varied from tears to laughter. So you've had people laughing, you've had people crying. It's just such a powerful witness. I will tell you kind of the joke. I don't think this is a joke question actually, but it's asking if you could do a commercial for us. Could you put something on ABC? Because you're such a powerful witness for the value of Catholic schools. And so people are expressing how much they appreciate that and what you've shared today. So
thank you. I have to help anyway.
Oh, that's great. The other question, one of the things that's big in Catholic schools is public assistance, public funding in terms of state school, and some states have that, some states don't. It's a state by state issue, but do you have any ideas about that or thoughts on that in terms of what Catholic schools could do to secure that or to invest? And maybe that's the question really, is state investment and local investment in these valuable institutions that you've so articulately talked about.
I mean, it seems to me that statistically, like the numbers are in the church's favor. That I would imagine you can produce evidence that would suggest the benefit, the graduation rates at Catholic schools, the retention of educators, the retention of students who make it through all 4 years of high school, and I think the same would exist for elementary schools. So certainly, I think that the evidence is there, that the education is valuable. And beyond that, though, I would think that there's a way. And I often have this conversation with my brothers at Curly, who are constantly raising money and are challenged by that. And I'm struck by, at least in the case of Curly, how little alumni contribute to school. I mean, the percentage I think is embarrassing. And so we often talk about sort of the marketing campaign and how do we do a better job at curling to reach other alumni? Because I feel like I tend to believe when I think about curling that there are enough men who graduated from Archbishop Curley who are living dynamic lives, who, if you make the case to them, if you make the argument to them, if you connect with them, they will respond, right? I mean, one of the challenges of a place like Curley, because we're a relatively young school, we only have a handful of classes where graduates have reached the age of retirement. They've been preoccupied with raising families and such. So I would think seeking funding is necessary, is valuable. I would certainly, as I'm sure like all of you, be concerned about what restrictions, what would come with that kind of money. But I just believe that there are enough people who like myself, who've benefited from Catholic education and who run corporations and who could lean in, that if we could find a better way, I say we, to package, to market what's dynamic about the Catholic education. I mean, we all know in this call what the national news media perspective has been colored by the last 25 years. And so getting beyond that simple narrative. One of the challenges with the mainstream news media in general is that, you know, we typecast a number of institutions. And so I think if we can find a better way to market, then I think between alumni, graduates, the church has the Catholic schools have a very bright future.
Wonderful. We have a number of questions, but I think maybe time for one more. So I'm going to try.
Okay. I'll give you the Presbyterian response, not the Pentecostal one, sir.
No, that's okay. Your responses are great. I loved you started off with indifference is a deadly weapon, right? So, and I think you've got a bunch of people listening to this who aren't indifferent at all. They're passionate and caring, but you've rightly articulated the challenges we face nationally, politically, socially, racial justice, all of these different issues. One of the things I remember when we had the podcast, I talked to you a little bit about this too, but you got such hope. You expressed such hope, and my question, or the kind of wrapping up maybe a bunch of questions that I've heard, is how do we have that hope in the face of such struggle, challenges, difficulties? We had a great keynote yesterday from Gloria Purvis. I don't know if you know her, but she was powerful in painting this sense of hope when circumstances seem so dire, and your story is obviously very challenging. So how do you find that hope in times of great struggle?
Sure. I think my first thought is, what's the option? The option can't be to give up, to give in. I mean, certainly, I mean, that's one of the things I loved about my experience at Curley in particular, is that for me, all of the answers exist in the book that we all read. And it was, and what I loved about my Catholic education is that the Bible wasn't presented as this, you know, tool of a magician, but as a practical instrument to live your life and to connect with the world. I mean, I find at every place I've ever been that exists in the human spirit is a spirit of hope. I've seen it in Haiti, where 300,000 people were dead. People clinging to life though they had nothing. Being in Indonesia after the tsunami and going to a fishing village where it was clear everybody was dead. But survivors, men who had been out fishing, who made it back to their village, still spent a day and a half digging in the mud, believing they would find a survivor. We see it all the time around the world when the evidence is clear. We see, I think about that mass murder at that Black Baptist church in South Carolina, in Charleston, and how those parishioners prayed for the young man who would butcher their loved ones and friends in their presence, attempted to kill them. So to me, like, that hope, that optimism that lives in all of us is part of the human experience. And I think just being mindful of that I think that's always where people will land if you create a landing space for them to land there. And certainly that's part of what Curly did for me and what the Catholic education did for me, that life's going to be hard, but here's a landing pad for you. And if you land there, not only is God's word there, but God's people are there, and they will lift you, they will nurture you. So I think it's more than impossible. I think it is.
That's great. Well, Byron, we're out of time, unfortunately. I'll tell everybody your Twitter handle is @ByronPitts. And so people might want to engage with you on Twitter with additional questions. But so grateful to you for your time. It's inspiring. You've obviously motivated everybody in attendance here. And so grateful to you. And God bless you on all your continued work.
Thank you, brother. God bless. Go Curly.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.